Hey, welcome to episode 222 of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. Do you ever feel that life is just more busy than you want it to be, but there's so much going on that you just can't say no, and the busyness keeps coming and coming and coming. So sometimes I definitely know I feel like that. I mention this because today's guest has felt like that at times in his life, and he's developed a whole different way of being and appreciating life and of teaching others. He's really inspiring. You're going to want to stay tuned. I'll tell you more in a second, but first, not that, not that. But first, this.
Today's guest, Terry Hershey.
Oh, welcome back. You know, the power of a person's words can travel far and wide. They certainly did for my next guest, Terry Hershey. He's all the way from Puget Sound in Washington. Anyway, his was traveled all the way from Seattle, Washington to little old Brandon, South Dakota. See what happened as a former guest of mine, Jennifer Jinks Hoffmann, started forwarding Terry's newsletters to my inbox. And even though our paths never crossed, I can attest he's an amazing storyteller, chock full of powerful and healing perspectives on life that help me see things differently. And I hope they will help you too. I should tell you a little about who he actually is. He is an author, humorist, inspirational speaker, dad, ordained minister, golf addict, and he is smitten with French wine. Please welcome to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast, Terry Hershey. Hey, Terry, welcome.
Thanks. You got me with the smitten with French wine.
Awesome. So when I look over your stuff, words that I don't always hear often come up frequently, like pausing, present moment, and sacredness. Have those words always been important to you, or
not at all. In fact, our culture is wired in a certain way to we admire people who are, quote, productive and who attain certain goals and who are relentless in their search for those. And it's an interesting thing that then, even in my days going to university and then seminary, is that also became a part of the way we were trained to do ministry too. And early on, I learned, because we say, oh, we're going to do ministry. Ironically, care or ministry, care of any kind, can only begin with self-care.
Care of any kind can only begin with self-care. What do you mean by that?
In other words, I can only give to you if I've got something in the tank to give you. So If there's nothing there to give, how am I going to be able to? And see, so it doesn't help me. For example, if I burn out, how does that help you? And so one of the
if
first,
you burn out, how does that help
yeah,
me?
yeah, it doesn't. And the sad irony is, for the sake of what we would call a successful way of living, we do burn out. And the sad thing is then, because I do not give myself the permission for self-care. And another way of saying it is the permission to be at home in my own skin, the permission to be this Terry, the permission to let my soul catch up with my body. And if that's not there, I don't have the capacity to access any of that. And I remember one of the things about seminary at the time was that we weren't really taught about self-care. Well, oh, wait a second. That's interesting. Self-care, that reminds me of a theological, biblical concept called Sabbath. Sabbath is about resting, stopping, catching up, self-care, Sabbath. Sabbath goes back to the beginning of the Bible. So that should be a very important part of who we are if we're going to do ministry, if we're going to do work of any kind. And so the first question is, where? And so I began to do a lot of work helping people in ministries and ask the question, where do I slow down? Where do I pause? Where do I replenish the tank? Where do I refuel? And that's how that got. And I've been doing that now for, 40 years, 45 years.
Okay, I'm trying to catch up here because my vision of a minister and of church is slow paced, is sacred, it just seems like a place where they would naturally nurture self-care and presence in clergy, but you're saying that's not always the case?
I would say it's very seldom the case. There's something about it doesn't really matter what your industry is. There's something that is very seductive about being able to show someone your calendar and say, look, it's full. See, look at that. It's full. And at the expense of lots of things, including my capacity to be available. But churches have that. And the pull as in for people who are responsible to be in charge of ministries, the kind of demands that are made on that are extraordinary. And so while on the outside that looks to the way you said it, it looks as, oh, that's a nice, reserved, quiet way to go about life. It's intense. It's intense. And we know that people who volunteer for churches do the same thing. Their schedules are full. You know what's interesting? Because here's what's difficult. And I think of this in terms of, because I work not only with church organizations, but I work with the medical community, healthcare, and I work with educators, because all three of those, people who get involved in those three, if you get involved in education, you're a teacher, you're whatever level in education, you're in healthcare, whatever level you're in healthcare, or you're in ministry, whether you're ordained or not, just ministry, any of those three, you get in those because your heart tells you that's where you want to be, right? Your heart tells you. And every single one of those industries, the person involved has a very difficult time saying the word no. They always say, okay, I'll do one more. And we saw this play out live during the COVID years, what happened to the healthcare industry, because we dumped on them. We dumped
Mm-hmm.
on them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very hard for them to find time to replenish. And the burnout rate was quite high. And it's the same for our educators too.
So in a way, the healthcare industry, the clergy, and the educators, they're blessed fields because people come to these fields with purpose and passion and intention. So, but then there's all these pressures to do more, do more, do more, take on just a ton of stuff. So how can a young clergy person, teacher, or educator prepare to do the career course in a more healthy way?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think as people are getting involved, because they do bring their passion and purpose to those vocations, if they're getting involved, they need the permission to ask this question. Where you can ask me, okay, where are you going to learn your training for this? Fine. Where are you going to learn how to be skilled at this? Fine. But I was never told to ask this question: where will you find replenishment?
The simple question, where can I repeat it? Where will you find replenishment?
Yes. Where will you find replenishment? And we're not taught. And in fact, even in the work I do now, when you sit in a room with people who've done that and you ask them that question, they'll look at you like, wow, I don't know. Because many of us weren't given the permission to do that. Or here's the irony. You ready for this? If I take a day off in one of those industries, some people think that's selfish. Wow. That's amazing to me, that if I take care of me, who's about to be your teacher or your nurse or your doctor or your pastor or your whatever, or a counselor, if I take care of that person, it's selfish. And so very often when we take a day off, we have to pretend like we're doing something different, because you don't want to say, oh, no, it's the same thing that in the New Testament, it's the same thing that Jesus got in trouble with. The disciples hated it when Jesus took time off.
Give one example of that.
In the very first chapter of Mark, which is the very first gospel, it's the very first book written about him. It said that Jesus was healing people, and then he stopped, and then he went to a quiet place to pray. And the disciples are like, wait a minute, there's a bunch of more people to be healed. You're not done yet. In other words, what are you doing stopping? And Jesus went to a quiet place to pray. What was it? Replenishment. Wow. So it's from the very beginning. And they said, Jesus, there's a bunch of people down there. And I love it. His actual response to him is, then let's go somewhere else. In other words, you have the wrong motivation for why we're doing this.
What would you say to like a young professional listening and going, oh, but Terry, I'm young, I'm full of energy. What you're saying, I can kind of see it makes sense, but it doesn't apply to me.
And that's actually a really good question, because that's the way our mindset works, is that I'll take care of it when I need it down the road. And I, I'll say to them, that's fine, but tell me, in this particular vocation you have, what are the gifts inside of you that you want to give to the people around you? And they'll tell me what they are. And then I'll say, how can you tell me how you take care of that part of you? How do you take care of that? How do you make sure it's sustained? How do you make sure it gets replenished? How do you make sure? And this is what I discovered. This is to your question, which is a good one. This is why it's been very helpful if you have people in your life, friends who know you, because more often than not, we don't see when we're overworked or overdone. We don't see it. And we just say what you would say right then, what you give as an illustration. We would say, yeah, but look at all the stuff I'm doing. See, and we don't see what it's doing. We don't see that I'm worn down. And here's what's interesting. You want the first symptom of being worn down is I really don't see, as a minister, as a doctor, as a nurse, as a teacher, I really don't see the person right in front of me anymore. I see where I need to be down the road. I see what else I have to do. In other words, I'm not really here. And it's the first symptom of being sort of malnourished, let's call it.
So the first symptom of being overworked is not being present to whoever is in front of you.
Exactly. Because
Wow.
because the schedule is so full, I'm already down the road. I'm already around the corner. I'm already in the next thing. And it's like, it's an interesting thing about, you ready for this? Because this is one thing I've done in sermons too, going back to that story I told from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus, this is the thing, Jesus never multitasked. He never did any multitasking. In other words, whatever it was, he stopped so he could focus right here. Focus on this person, this conversation, this question. That's a whole different deal. This cup of coffee.
I think of a heart surgeon comes to mind. If she is not present to the patient she's operating on, if she is trying to multitask and do a million things in her head, that could be a very life and death situation, like very quickly.
And to your point, which is a great one, and I've read memoirs by people, surgeons, doctors, who talk exactly about that. And because their capacity as a skill set, in other words, they're skilled enough, they can do that. They said, but it doesn't really benefit my patient. It doesn't benefit them because I'm not really here. Just to your point, I'm not. And I can easily do something that would be detrimental. Easily.
So you're saying they're skilled enough to drive and metaphorically drive and drink coffee at the same time, but that opens the door to the possibility of something very detrimental, like a mistake.
Yeah. We know that when you're worn down, your timing is off and you don't really have the capacity. I mean, we know this too. In conversations we have in relationships, when we're worn down, the way we respond and react is not really personal. It's reactive. And so it comes from a place in here that's malnourished.
So you personally were going down the road of doing more and more and becoming more and more malnourished. When did your trajectory start to change?
Well, I mean, basically, when something inside of you crashes and burns, it's one of those, okay, now what? And that's what it was. That's the way it was for me. And in other words, what's curious is I had been starting to preach this kind of stuff, and yet I wasn't really practicing it. So there you go.
So you were preaching it on Sunday morning, but
Right. Yeah, which is, I always say that's why they call us preachers and not practicers, I guess. But the one of the gifts I had, my spiritual director was a Benedictine monk, and so I would spend time at a Benedictine monastery way out in the high desert, so it's away from everything. And it was just another kind of way of learning how to just be alone with myself and like it, because I wasn't very good at that. And so that was the new let's call it rewiring. Back to your question, is there was a time in my life I needed to be rewired. And so you rewire yourself when you practice these new ways of being. And people do this in many areas of their life. I know, if they learn how to eat different, okay? In other words, they have to rewire the way they eat. Well, it's the same with slowing down and nourishment for your spirit. And you have to rewire the way you do that.
so to start rewiring, you had to do something radically different. You had to, for you went to the high desert and you had a monk who was a mentor out there. Like, how do you making changes in any of our lives is tough. I was just reading about New Year's resolutions, and most of them drop off in like 4 months. How did what gave you the motivation to travel out to the high desert and try a new way of being?
Well, there's a time, going back to my metaphor about changing the way you eat, all of a sudden you're thinking, this isn't fun for the first month you're doing that, right? But then all of a sudden it feels different. You're thinking, okay, my energy's different. The way my mind is wired is different. The clarity of my thinking is different. And when you see that, you go, okay, this is worth it. I want to honor this. And that's what I discovered. This is different. Because of that, it enabled me to want to make that a part of my rituals.
So you had to keep with it long enough for it to.
Yeah, in fact, you keep with it. You don't give it up ever. You find it. I can't go to that place anymore, but I have my own places to do that, where I have my downtime. And so, yeah, it's a part of your wiring now. You're wired that way now.
What would you say? Like sometimes someone picks a self-care activity that just doesn't resonate with them. Like if I had started weightlifting for self-care, I don't think I would have gone very far because it doesn't appeal to me. So what would you say about waiting the time it takes to really start enjoying and finding value in a nourishing practice versus giving up a self-care practice that just isn't for you and moving and trying a new one? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But it's interesting that whenever we do retreats, and it's a 3-day retreat, and I lead people through various exercises during the 3 days, the affirmation of, in other words, there's a recognition even with those small gestures, those small steps of, this is something I want. Is it easy to do, to your question? No. Is it easier to continue the way I was? Yeah. But the recognition of that, and then for me, it's always about give yourself the permission for the small steps. It's all about little steps, really. It's about little steps. Give yourself permission for that little step. And okay, you're going to give yourself grief for it. You're going to say, well, I'm not going to be able to continue. Okay, but try it. Just try it again. Little steps. This isn't a contest. It's not a race.
So just keep going.
Yeah.
Going with.
Yeah. Yeah. In other words, Al. So when I get up tomorrow, am I going to give myself the permission to say, where will I find replenishment? Good. Yeah. Exactly.
How did you get interested in writing? You've written lots of books.
Well, when I was young, I would journal. So I've always sort of written, and I read vociferously. From the time I was really young, I would read. I loved reading. So reading and journaling. And there's just something about writing that's always felt it's almost life-giving to me, you know. It's like it's a way, because part of it, the writing, is that I'm writing not necessarily for an audience. I'm writing for me, and then and because I'm doing that, because it's personal in that sense, people, when they read it, can relate to it that way.
How like a lot of us start off in a craft, be it playing music or writing or acting or whatever, like really focus on doing it for someone else, doing it to impress the audience, doing it to get accolades. How do you teach yourself to write for you?
Yeah, in fact, that's a great acknowledgement, because the internal need to do it for accolades or for someone else. That's that same thing we talked about, is you're not here. I'm not here in my own skin anymore. I'm out there. And so everything I do requires the question, what will they think? And you ready for the irony? Is we don't necessarily know who they are, but they control our lives. You know? What will they think? And we're thinking, okay, who are they? I don't know, but I don't want them to think things. Okay, good. But as long as I'm that way, and it's the interesting permission of, once you let go of that, the need to dance, or to have what one of my favorite authors called a glittering image that someone would look at. Once you can give that up, you have the gift of enough for what you have right now. This sentence, this word. And is it, because a lot of people, they judge it, then they're going to think, well, this isn't good enough, or what will they think? And I'm thinking, just let yourself speak. Just let
yourself speak.
Just let it be there. Yeah. Because the other part we'll get to when time comes. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation when you give people the permission to ask the question, who are you dancing for? I forget what movie that was from, but it's like the great dancer, and they were thinking, they finally realized they could dance for themselves. They weren't dancing for someone else.
What's the balance between self and other in like a profession? Cause like as a doctor, your job is helping someone else heal.
Right.
As a clergyman, you're a clergy person. Your job is helping other people hear the word, hear the message.
Mm-hmm.
So then those professions seem to be totally like giving of oneself and not really dancing for oneself at all. Well, how do you find balance in that?
Actually, you are dancing for oneself, because the surgery I'm doing is because this way I do that surgery in the right way is coming from something in my heart that wants to do that, not because this person is looking over my shoulder, getting ready to judge what I'm doing. And it's the same as a clergy person too. And if I'm sitting one-on-one with somebody and they're telling me something in their life, and they're waiting for me to give them pastoral care or counseling, if I'm thinking, what should I say? I'm not really there. I haven't really listened to them. If I'm responding by saying, I heard you, I see you, here's what I would like to share with you. That's coming from this Terry. It's not coming from some Terry that's trying to impress somebody else.
So when someone's connected to the heart and to the purpose for being of service, it's a lot more. There's a lot more of a continual. I get the image of an artesian well, like
Absolutely,
like
100%.
stuff keeps coming.
Absolutely, 100%, 100%, 100% true. Yes, 100% true.
Something, a moment that you shared that it sounds like you also get a lot of replenishment from gardening, of course, but then you shared a moment of being in the Netherlands and being with a group of friends and laughing uproariously, and then going for a walk. What happened on that walk?
So I was going by a house, and there was a woman, middle-aged woman. I don't know, older. I'm not sure her age, but she was. Wasn't noticing me, but she was taking care of parts of her garden, and she was tending to the flowers and the plants, almost like they were her children. And there was something so. And a phrase that I now use in my writing is called the sacrament of the present moment. I didn't make it up. A Franciscan made it up a few hundred years ago, but the sacrament of the present moment. She was so unbelievably 100% present with her flowers that I was vicariously drawn into someone who was fully alive. She wasn't living if only. She wasn't living when. She wasn't living with should. She was simply embracing joy and vicarious gladness and delight. And I stopped because I thought, yes, that's what I want to experience. That's what I want to write about. And every single one of us has the capacity to live that way. All the time? No, but we have moments. But we give ourselves grief if we don't.
Yes. First of all, it was just relaxing when I heard you tell that story. Like you're reliving the scene in your mind, and it's like the details are coming to slowly, and it's just very relaxing.
Well, it's interesting because the word slow is that what the scene did is it slowed me down. And anything that allows me to be in the present slows me down. It's like, whoa, did you see that? Did you notice that? Did you pay attention to that? And so, yeah, that's the invitation. And even reliving it, wonderfully reliving it, I can feel it slowing me down again, you know?
So but then you, how do you do both? You have a busy life. You're a father. You own 3 businesses. You travel a lot for work as a speaker. How do you live a professional life where you are publishing books and doing all this stuff, and at the same time live a life of slowness? How do you do both and instead of either or?
The one of them, the production part of my world has to be fueled by the replenishment part of my world. So think of it as a garden concept. The dirt that my production part grows in has to be replenishment dirt, if that makes sense. In other words, because I'm taking care of the replenishment part, I bring the best Terry to the writing part or the speaking part or the traveling part. Now, does traveling drive me crazy? Sometimes, yeah. And so that's when you got to, find these other ways to have replenishment sustenance so that you don't go overboard mentally,
What are your favorite ways to replenish yourself on a daily basis today?
There has to be something relative to the garden. There has to be something relative to nature. I walk every day, and it's just woodland. I can't show you. I could, but I mean, it's just woodland. And so there has to be nature in the garden. Has to be that. Those are non-negotiables. And
How did gardening become a major part of your replenishment routine?
I used to live in Southern California, and about 37 years ago, I moved from Southern California up to Seattle area, and went on an island, Vashon Island, and because my life was so driven, and I didn't even know it. Back to one of your earlier questions. In other words, I was so wired to go fast that I didn't even realize. And I remember laying in the grass in the house that I had just bought out some acreage under a fruit tree, and I thought, I don't know what this feeling is. I don't recognize this. And I went just for fun. I went back to school to study horticulture, just because I loved back to you the story about I saw that woman in Holland back when I was a younger kid. Something about that nurtured something in me. So I went back to school and to do a horticulture program. And it turns out that I started living in my own garden, loving my own garden, having my own garden. And then I started creating gardens for others, sanctuary gardens, sanctuary spaces, spaces of replenishment. And I still do that some to this day. But yeah, that's how I got involved.
So, am I understanding correctly that that woman who you saw that just doing her thing, living her life, loving her garden, did she directly inspire you to sort of to go into her to study horticulture?
Not directly, although stories like that pop up in my mind that show me there was a part of my spirit that came alive. That came alive, and I realized that once I started creating my own garden, and studying gardening, the being alive part made sense.
What would you say to the people listening? That this is a really important question. I hope about discovering the things that make them come alive. Like if someone's listening and going, "Oh, Terry, I just don't know. My life is full of have-tos. I don't feel alive." What would you say to them about discovering those things for
I would,
themselves?
well, instead of making it a project for them, like you better go discover this, I would just start with some questions. Tell me, what are the things in your life that slow you down? What are the things in your life that make you pause and look, like pay attention with all of your senses? See, hear. What does that for you? What makes your heart connect? If your heart's connected, tell me what that is. And people they'll think, oh, I'm not. But if you give people time, they'll find little things that do that. Even though, like, you'll be in a meeting and one woman will say, I don't have anything like that. And then they'll think, wait a minute, when my grandchild is on my lap, every single one of those is true. I say, good. Now that's a replenishment time. Now we know what we're talking about. And for some people, it's a different thing. For some people, it's music. For some people, it's quiet. For some people, it's nap. For some people, it's walking. For some people, it's reading. So some people, it's cooking. For some people, it's a certain kind of type of prayer.
Gosh, as you so part of it is finding something that slows us down, and you're not saying, you don't mean like traffic jams, which slow us.
Yeah, traffic. The irony is traffic jams don't really slow us down. They just make us more anxious. But what makes you pause? What gives you pause? And you know what's interesting? You know, one answer that a lot of people give is if they have a pet, the pet will come in and the pet will make them pause. In other words, the animal knows more about this than we do.
I just spent an evening with some friends who have a new 5-month-old baby, and
Yeah.
And babies definitely make a person pause.
Yeah. And make you pay attention and bring all of your senses to the forefront. Yeah, exactly. And your heart's engaged. That's the sacrament of the present moment.
So shifting gears slightly as we get towards the end of our time together, I'm inspired to ask you this question because I want to learn your answer, obviously. But what's one mistake you've made that you feel comfortable talking about, and and what did it teach you? How did it expand your life?
The fact that to be clergy, I had to be a persona, a specific persona that was meant to impress people, and it takes everything out of your spirit of who you are and puts you in this other sort of suit that requires you to spend all of your energy preoccupied with public opinion. And you're at the mercy of it. And you don't even at the time realize it because you're trying to, quote, be this person you should be. Because I was not comfortable just letting Terry be Terry. I hadn't been taught that, that's the groundwork to being whatever my vocational name, pastor or clergy, is only after, am I willing to be Terry?
And you really, coming back to your writing, you really discovered being able to be Terry as you wait. You wait for you garden for you. And so now when you speak to a large audience these days, how do you let yourself be Terry first and then give to the audience from your artesian well?
Actually, that's where the well comes from. Is I'm far more open about that Terry speaking now than I ever have been, and because in other words, I just let that Terry be on stage, and so my answers can be more honest and more vulnerable, and because I gave up, back to your thing about mistake, I had to give up that caricature of who I needed to be.
And that sounds kind of hard because in that caricature there was a lot of status and power probably and
yeah, which is exactly a perfect example of what goes on in our culture today. Is power has to do with caricatures of people, not the people, not what's deep down. And so and so that's why we see that. And I wanted to give that up because once I have to maintain that caricature, I do it over and against other people, and I put other people down. And that's not a good way to live.
And getting back to being present with other people, I guess you have to almost be more present to the character and than with the person in front of you because you're trying to maintain something.
Yeah, actually, that's a great insight. Yeah, and so you can tell. I mean, so you're self-absorbed. You just gave the perfect illustration of selfish. That's exactly right. You're correct. Yeah. So you're self-absorbed and you're selfish, which means because I'm looking at the caricature only, I'm not available for the people I'm with. That's very good. I'm going to use that, I'm going to borrow that from you.
Oh, sure, please. I no, when you say selfish, I'm not. Do you mean that like in a mean way, or more in like a feel like a way of feel like I have to be this thing that I'm not in order to?
Well, yeah, of course, it's selfish simply means you're preoccupied here, so you can't be available. And it, in and of itself, it can turn out mean. I mean, because I'm just not there. I mean, whether it has any kind of acrimony to it is a whole different thing. But yeah, it's not kind to the people around me.
Oh, this is important. Please, before we go, I just have a few more questions. But please say, what does kindness mean to you?
Kindness means the permission to respond to the reality that in every person is dignity, and I would actually say in every person is the image of God, and to acknowledge that, to see that, and to speak to that. Kindness means I speak to that. I speak to that reality, and that's kindness. Kindness isn't a particular tool that I use to say certain words. No, I just know that if I speak to you and to the dignity I see in you, kindness comes out of me.
Oh, wow, I'm glad I really glad I asked that question. That was a beautiful answer. Thanks so much. One more question. In my work, I talk about doing our imperfect best, and what it means to me is that I envision what I want for my life and want to offer the world, and I go for it. But when mistakes come up, when obstacles happen, instead of letting them stop me, I try and go forward and learn from them, and once again go towards my best. What does doing your imperfect best mean to you, Terry Hershey?
It means that if I embrace this, Terry, that I have the gift of enough, then that means that I have capacity to make a choice to give that Terry to the world around me, and to make that Terry available. And failure or missteps doesn't deny the reality of this Terry. It doesn't diminish it, because grace says you're still this Terry. And because of that, I now have the capacity to see that failure or that misstep not as something that demeans me and my identity, but simply an opportunity to say, oh, okay, I learned from that. I grew from that. I have more of me to give now because of that. And I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid to fall down. I mean, I loved Michael Jordan's comment, because he made so many unbelievable shots, like, the best basketball player. And he said to somebody, you realize I missed more shots than I made, right?
Wow. So often when we look at superstars, we just see perfection.
I know, but he's just saying, I had more failures than I had successes, and I'm still the best.
Wow. This has been very inspiring.
Thanks for having me.
If someone wants to connect with you and learn more from you and be more moved by your heart, how should they connect with you?
Just my name, Terry Hershey. Terry, Terry Hershey, like the chocolate bar. TerryHershey.com. if you just Google me or go on terryhershey.com, you'll get that. And then my Sabbath moment, which is my blog, they can sign up for that. And there's videos that are available for free on the website. They can learn from a lot of this stuff. So just go to terryhershey.com.
And we didn't get to it, but I can attest that the stories you tell in the Sabbath moment, they stick with the person.
Thank you. We right now we need stories more than anything just to stay alive. So I agree. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your time and being on. And please stay on for a minute afterwards, Terry.
Will do. Thanks.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. Wasn't this amazing? I'll be digesting and savoring this hour for a while, and I hope it gives you what you've been looking for too. And please tune in for another amazing guest next week. We'll ask questions, and everyone's amazing. You watching are amazing. I mean, just we have to, if we want to feel our amazement or feel another person's amazement, just ask enough questions and we'll get there. Well, anyway, talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.